The princess of the distant alien world had always lived in a life of rules, tradition, and expectation. Her world was beautiful in ways humans could hardly imagine, filled with glowing plants, floating rivers, and skies that shimmered in colors no earthly eye could see. Yet for all the beauty around her, she often felt trapped within invisible walls. She was known for her intelligence, grace, and curiosity, but her life was not her own. Every step, every word, every thought had to follow the expectations of her royal lineage. She had been raised to believe that her future was not hers to choose, that every action she took would reflect on her family, her kingdom, and her people. Now, everything was about to change in a way she could never have expected. For years, her world had been in careful negotiation with humans, a species both feared and admired for their unpredictability. While many of her advisors spoke of humans as strange and sometimes reckless, they also recognized the potential benefits of forming bonds with them. As part of these ongoing alliances, the princess had been betrothed to a human diplomat. The arrangement had been decided by her parents and the council, and while it was considered politically wise, it terrified her. The very idea of sharing her life with someone from a world so different made her heart race. She wondered endlessly about him, picturing all the ways their differences might clash. Would he laugh at her customs, misinterpret her gestures, speak words that carried meanings she could not grasp? She could not deny the fear she felt. It was a strange, tight feeling in her chest that made her palms sweat and her thoughts scatter like wind-blown leaves. The palace where she lived had been prepared for the diplomatic meeting, and it gleamed with a mixture of her world's alien beauty and elements borrowed from human culture to make her guest feel welcome. She wandered the long corridors with a careful eye examining each detail, as if by knowing every corner she could somehow control the fear inside her. Each room reflected the perfection expected of her as a princess, and yet perfection felt suffocating when it reminded her of the strict rules she had grown up with. She paused before a large window, looking out at the floating gardens below. The plants swayed gently in the air currents, their light bathing the garden in soft, warm colors. The sight usually brought her peace, but now, it did little to calm the nervous fluttering in her stomach. She thought of the human who would soon arrive, wondering about him. What did humans look like up close? Would his expressions be easy to read, or would he confuse her with gestures she could not understand? She remembered reading the human reports sent to her world's council. Humans were said to be emotional, quick to anger or joy, but also capable of great compassion. They could be impulsive yet resourceful. The princess wondered whether she could bridge the enormous gap between their worlds, whether she could ever feel truly comfortable with someone who seemed so alien, yet so like herself in his ability to feel deeply. Fear twisted her thoughts, but beneath it, a small curiosity began to grow. What if this human could be more than an arrangement, more than a symbol of political strategy? What if he could be someone she might actually know and trust? Despite the flutter of hope, the princess reminded herself to remain cautious. She had seen too many alliances fail, too many hearts crushed by carelessness or misunderstanding. She had learned early on that vulnerability could be dangerous, especially for someone in her position. Trust had to be earned, not given freely, and so she prepared herself mentally to keep her distance. She rehearsed polite words and careful gestures in her mind, practicing the face she would show the human when he arrived. She reminded herself that appearances mattered, that her duty to her people came first. Yet, even as she tried to steel herself, she could not completely silence the quiet voice inside that wondered about the man who would soon stand before her. Finally, the day of the human's arrival came. The palace doors opened to reveal him stepping into a world entirely unlike his own. The princess watched from a distance, hidden behind a column, observing the way he looked around with curiosity, yet with a steady calm that surprised her. He did not fumble or panic at the strange surroundings. Instead, he moved carefully, as if trying to respect the rules of a world he barely understood. The princess's heart skipped a beat. Even before meeting him, she could sense that this human was different from the stories she had heard. There was something measured and thoughtful in his movements, a patience that spoke of strength. For a moment she allowed herself a fleeting hope that perhaps this meeting would not be as dreadful as she had imagined. When the moment of introduction arrived, she walked forward, her steps light but deliberate. She had prepared for a formal greeting, a careful bow and the proper words, and yet, when their eyes met for the first time, she froze. It was not the fear of the human himself that held her back, but the intensity of his gaze. He looked at her, with something she had not expected. Not fear, not confusion, not judgment, but a quiet respect. That single look, steady and unwavering, seemed to reach across the chasm between their worlds. In it, she saw acknowledgement, recognition, and even a subtle hint of warmth. It was a gaze that suggested he had come to understand her, even before words had been exchanged. For the first time in her life, the princess felt a strange mixture of relief and curiosity. The fear that had consumed her began to loosen its grip, replaced by a cautious interest. Perhaps this human was not just a symbol of duty. Perhaps, somehow he could be a companion, someone with whom she might navigate the complexities of life, duty, and expectation. She did not yet know how or if that could happen, but the seed of possibility had been planted, and in that moment, standing in a grand hall filled with the light of 1,000 floating lanterns, she realized that the beginning of her journey with him had already started. Even as she practiced her composed royal demeanor, a part of her whispered that the story was just beginning, and that fear, though still present, might one day give way to something far greater, a connection that crossed not just worlds, but hearts. The first meeting between the princess and the human groom felt like the beginning of a story neither of them fully understood. The hall was bright with glowing crystals suspended from the ceiling, casting soft colors across polished floors that reflected every movement. Servants moved quietly, observing from the edges, but the princess barely noticed them. Her eyes were fixed on him, the human standing a few steps away, uncertain yet composed in the strange grandeur of her world. He looked around with curiosity, his gaze taking in the floating gardens, the alien architecture, and the subtle light that bathed the room in ethereal shades. He did not seem frightened, only careful, as though he was learning the rules of a game he had never played. The princess approached him slowly, her steps measured, her posture perfect, as was expected of her as a royal. She bowed slightly, offering the traditional greeting of her world. The human responded with a polite gesture he had learned in preparation for this meeting, one meant to show respect without overstepping boundaries. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the vast differences between their worlds seemed to disappear. He did not flinch at her appearance, nor did he appear intimidated by the glow of her skin or the elegance of her ceremonial attire. There was no awkwardness in his eyes, only a steady curiosity, a willingness to understand her world rather than judge it. That gaze, calm and open, struck the princess in a way she had not expected. Their first conversation was formal and cautious, filled with polite phrases and careful words. She asked about his journey across the stars, and he spoke honestly about his awe at the alien landscapes he had seen on his way. He described the beauty of the floating rivers, the colors of the sky, and the way the light touched the alien cities, speaking with an admiration that was sincere, not forced. The princess listened, surprised at how human words could carry such genuine emotion, even when describing things so different from their home. She realized that for all her preparation, for all the formalities she had memorized, this human had a way of speaking that was entirely honest, entirely unpretentious. It was refreshing and strangely comforting. Even as the conversation continued, the princess remained cautious. She tested him, asking about his experiences with different cultures, challenging him to explain how he would behave in her world's ceremonies and customs. She expected hesitation, perhaps even mistakes, but he met each challenge with patience. He listened carefully, asked thoughtful questions, and made subtle gestures to show he understood. Every time he responded with calm respect, the princess felt her fear slowly melting. She began to notice small details about him, the way he tilted his head when curious, the softness in his voice, the way he seemed genuinely interested in learning about her world. These details were not things she had anticipated, and yet they planted seeds of trust in her mind. The human's patience was remarkable. He did not rush, did not try to impress her with grandeur or knowledge, and he never seemed frustrated by her questions or the complexities of her world. Instead, he approached every interaction with careful observation, showing a respect that went beyond words. The princess had seen many humans in reports, many diplomats who came and went, but none had displayed this level of sincerity. She realized that he was not there just as a political tool, not merely to satisfy her parents' expectations. He was present because he wanted to understand, because he wanted to connect. That realization began to shift something deep inside her. Over the next few hours, their conversation moved from formal topics to lighter ones. They talked about small things, books he had read on his world, music that humans enjoyed, stories of his childhood. She shared tales from her own upbringing, stories of gardens that glowed at night, of floating schools and lessons under the alien moons, and of celebrations that lit up the skies with colors no human eyes could have imagined. The human listened, with awe, asking questions not out of politeness but because he genuinely wanted to know more. The princess began to feel a spark of excitement, a curiosity about the human beside her that she had not expected. Each story, each small shared laugh, chipped away at the fear that had held her captive for so long. She found herself studying him carefully, noticing how he carried himself with a quiet confidence, how his eyes remained steady when she spoke, how he seemed capable of seeing beyond appearances into the heart of her words. The princess realized that she had been afraid not of the human himself, but of the unknown. She had imagined that humans were unpredictable, perhaps even reckless, and she had worried about her own inability to control the situation. Yet here he was, showing her that trust could exist even across worlds, that understanding was possible even between beings so different. The realization was both thrilling and frightening, for it challenged every assumption she had ever held, about humans and about herself. By the end of their first meeting, the princess felt a cautious warmth growing in her chest. She did not yet know if she could fully trust him, if she could feel comfortable letting her guard down completely. But she knew that the fear she had carried for so long had begun to change. She saw a human capable of respect, patience, and empathy, qualities she had not expected to find, and in his gaze, steady and unwavering, she glimpsed a hint of something more. A promise, perhaps, that he could be someone who would stand by her, not just as a groom, but as a companion, someone who might understand the complexities of her life without judgment. That evening, after their meeting ended and the human was escorted to his quarters, the princess lingered in the grand hall. She walked slowly past the glowing crystals, thinking about the day, about the first impression of the human who had seemed so different from the stories she had heard. She realized that fear had been a shadow over her life, coloring her expectations and her thoughts. But now, for the first time, she felt that perhaps fear could be replaced by curiosity, by a desire to know someone beyond the walls of her own world. She felt the tiniest flicker of hope, fragile yet persistent, that this human might not only fulfill the political alliance, but might also offer her something she had long thought impossible: genuine connection and understanding. As she returned to her chambers, the princess could not help but smile softly to herself. She knew that this was only the beginning of their journey, that many challenges lay ahead, and that she still had much to learn about him and his world. Yet for the first time, she did not feel paralyzed by fear. Instead, she felt a spark of curiosity, an eagerness to see what might unfold, and a quiet hope that perhaps, just perhaps, the human groom she had feared might become someone she could trust and even care for. That thought lingered in her mind as she prepared for the days to come, a gentle reminder that first impressions, when met with sincerity and patience, could open doors she had never imagined possible. In the days that followed their first meeting, the princess and the human groom began to spend more time together, under the watchful eyes of their attendants and advisors. At first, every interaction was formal and cautious, each word chosen carefully, each movement measured. But slowly, the boundaries that had seemed so rigid began to loosen. The princess, who had feared the unpredictability of humans, found herself intrigued by the way he approached her world, He did not rush, did not force familiarity, but instead observed and listened, learning the customs, the gestures, the unspoken rules that governed life in her kingdom. It was a patience she had never expected, and it impressed her deeply. She began to test him in small ways, curious about whether he could adapt to her world's complexities. She would ask him about the meaning behind certain gestures, or challenge him to explain how he would react in various ceremonies. Many humans, she knew, might become frustrated, embarrassed, or dismissive in the face of such challenges. But he met each one with calm attention, never faltering, never mocking her questions. He asked clarifying questions, repeated the instructions he had learned, and made subtle gestures to show he understood. Each small success, each moment when he seemed to grasp the nuances of her culture, chipped away at the fear that had dominated her thoughts for so long. The princess noticed small, unexpected things about him. The way his eyes lit up when he learned something new, the slight smile he would offer when he understood a difficult custom, the patience he showed when he made a mistake and quickly corrected it. These were not grand gestures, not displays of power or wealth, but quiet acts of attentiveness and respect. She began to see him not just as a human from another world, but as a person who genuinely wanted to understand her people, and her life. The walls of fear she had built around herself began to crumble, replaced by curiosity and even a growing admiration. As they spent more time together, the conversation shifted from formalities to more personal topics. The human shared stories of his own life, of childhood experiences, of learning about humans' diverse cultures, and of the ways his world celebrated moments of joy. He spoke of the challenges he had faced growing up, of lessons learned through mistakes, and of his hopes for the future. The princess listened with fascination. She found herself laughing at his anecdotes, sometimes marveling at how different his world was from hers, sometimes recognizing similarities in emotions and experiences. It was strange and delightful to hear of life from a completely different perspective, and she realized that this human could offer her insights she had never encountered before. At the same time, the princess began to share stories of her own life. She spoke of the floating gardens where she had played as a child, of lessons under the alien moons, of celebrations that filled the skies with brilliant colors. She recounted experiences that shaped her, moments that were both joyous and challenging, and memories that she had never shared with anyone outside her family. The human listened intently, asking questions not out of obligation but out of genuine interest. He wanted to understand her world, and in doing so, he began to bridge the gap between them. With every story shared, every question asked, their understanding of each other grew, and the princess felt a connection forming, a quiet, steady bond that had nothing to do with politics or duty. The human's presence became a comfort to her. She realized that she could speak freely with him, expressing thoughts and fears she had never voiced aloud. She began to recognize the subtle ways he offered support, whether it was a gentle nod when she spoke, a patient smile when she struggled with a question, or the quiet attentiveness that made her feel heard. It was a stark contrast to the rigid, often impersonal interactions she had with advisors and officials. In his company, she felt seen not as a princess, not as a symbol, but as a person. The fear she had carried for so long began to fade, replaced by a sense of ease and trust she had never thought possible. One afternoon they walked through the palace gardens together. The floating plants swayed gently, and the soft light of the twin moons reflected on the water below. She asked him to describe how the gardens felt to him, to see them through human eyes. He spoke with wonder, noticing details she had overlooked herself. The way the light refracted through the translucent leaves, the gentle movement of the flowers as if they were dancing, the soft hum of the air currents carrying scents she had grown accustomed to but never examined closely. His observations made her see her own world anew with fresh eyes and renewed appreciation. She realized that he not only respected her culture, but also enriched her experience of it simply by being present and attentive. The princess found herself anticipating these moments together. She began to notice small details about him, the way he concentrated when learning something new, the patience he showed even when confused, the sincerity in his voice and gaze. Each day, her fear of humans diminished, replaced by trust and admiration. She began to imagine a future where they could work together, where their differences would not divide them but complement one another. She wondered whether, in time, their bond could grow into something deeper, something beyond duty, something built on understanding and respect. At night, when she reflected on the day, she realized how far she had come in such a short time. The fear that had once seemed overwhelming was now tempered by curiosity and a sense of possibility. She recognized that the human beside her was unlike any she had imagined. He was patient, kind, intelligent, and attentive. Most importantly, he had shown her that differences between worlds were not obstacles to connection. They could be opportunities for growth and learning. By the end of this period, the princess understood that her initial fear had been only the beginning. She was learning not just about the human, but about herself, about the capacity to open her heart and mind to someone entirely different. She realized that relationships, even those arranged by duty, could develop into understanding, trust, and even friendship. And as she looked into his steady gaze each day, she saw a reflection of patience, respect, and sincerity that encouraged her to continue letting go of fear. The days passed, and the princess felt a change within herself. Where once she had worried about every gesture and word, now she could laugh and speak freely. Where once she had felt trapped by expectations, now she felt a sense of partnership, a shared journey that was beginning to unfold. The human, through his calm attention and genuine respect, had begun to dissolve the walls she had built. And as she continued to navigate her world and their interactions, she realized that trust, patience, and understanding were powerful tools that could turn fear into connection, suspicion into friendship, and hesitation into hope. By the time the week came to an end, the princess no longer saw the human merely as a stranger from another world. She saw him as someone who could understand her, someone who could listen without judgment, someone who could navigate the unknown with her by his side. The fear that had once been so strong had been replaced by cautious trust and a growing curiosity, and for the first time she felt that their meeting, which had begun with fear, was evolving into something remarkable, a beginning of a bond that could cross worlds, cultures, and expectations. The turning point in their relationship came one evening, under the soft glow of the twin moons that hung low in the sky. The princess had asked the human to accompany her to the palace gardens, a place where the floating flowers shimmered in colors no human eyes could have imagined. Normally, these gardens were filled with attendants and servants, but tonight, they walked alone, giving them a rare moment of privacy. The princess felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety as they moved along the gentle paths, her heart beating faster with every step. She had spent so long fearing the unknown, fearing this human, fearing how their worlds might clash. But tonight she wanted to speak honestly, to let him see the thoughts she had kept hidden from everyone else. As they walked, she finally found the courage to voice her fears. She spoke of her anxiety about marrying someone from a completely different world, of the worry that she might fail in understanding him or that he might fail to understand her. She admitted that she had felt trapped by duty, pressured to accept an alliance she had not chosen for herself. She spoke of the fear that her independence and identity would be compromised, and that her emotions would be overshadowed by the expectations of her kingdom. For the first time she spoke freely, her voice soft but steady, letting the words carry the weight she had hidden inside for so long. The human listened without interruption. His gaze was steady, unwavering, and full of attention. She noticed that he did not react with judgment, nor did he seem confused or alarmed. Instead, he simply listened, absorbing each word, each emotion with care. When she paused, he spoke gently, acknowledging her feelings and offering reassurance without dismissing her fears. He shared that he too had been nervous about their union, that he had wondered whether he could adapt to her world and whether he could live up to the expectations placed upon him. But he admitted that in getting to know her, he had come to admire her strength, her wisdom, and her courage. Hearing his honest words, the princess felt a warmth she had never experienced. In that quiet moment, Surrounded by the luminous flowers and soft night light, the princess realized that fear had been clouding her judgment. She had assumed that humans were unpredictable and that their differences could never be bridged. Yet here was someone who had shown patience, respect, and understanding. For the first time, she saw beyond the surface, beyond the formalities and the duty, to the genuine person standing beside her. The human's sincerity broke through the layers of anxiety and caution she had built around herself. She felt an unexpected sense of relief, a quiet joy that perhaps their worlds were not as far apart as she had feared. They continued to talk, sharing their thoughts and experiences with honesty. The princess realized that the human's presence had become a source of comfort. She could express her vulnerabilities without fear, knowing he would not exploit them, knowing he would not judge her for her worries. And in return, he shared more of his life, his hopes, and the lessons he had learned. The exchange created a bond stronger than either of them had anticipated. It was no longer just a formal arrangement. It was a growing connection built on trust, respect, and the courage to be open with one another. As the evening wore on, the princess felt a profound shift within herself. She recognized that her fear had been a barrier, keeping her from seeing the truth about the human beside her. She had imagined him as a stranger, a potential source of discomfort, but now she saw him as someone capable of partnership and understanding. Her heart, once guarded and anxious, began to feel lighter. She realized that the human had not only met her expectations but had surpassed them, showing qualities she admired and valued deeply. For the first time, she truly believed that they could face the future together, not as strangers bound by duty, but as companions navigating two worlds side by side. By the time they returned to the palace, the princess felt a newfound clarity. The fear that had dominated her thoughts was replaced by trust, admiration, and a quiet hope. She understood that connection was possible, even across vast differences, and that understanding could grow from patience, empathy, and honesty. She knew that challenges still lay ahead, but she no longer felt paralyzed by anxiety. Instead, she felt empowered, ready to face the days to come with someone who had proven himself worthy of her trust and respect. In the calm of that evening, under the glow of the moons and the gentle hum of the gardens, the princess realized that fear had been replaced by something far more powerful: hope, trust, and the beginning of a bond that could withstand the trials of two worlds. Time moved forward, and the princess and the human groom grew closer with each passing day. They continued to learn from one another, discovering shared interests, laughing at differences, and celebrating small successes in understanding each other's cultures. The princess found herself genuinely enjoying his company, anticipating conversations and cherishing the moments they spent together. She no longer saw him merely as a political necessity, but as someone who could be a true partner in life, someone who brought insight, kindness, and companionship into her world. The human groom, too, embraced this connection. He took joy in discovering the intricacies of her culture, the beauty of her world, and the depth of her thoughts and emotions. He realized that their bond was growing stronger with every shared experience, and that their relationship, once dictated by duty, was becoming a partnership built on mutual respect and understanding. He admired her intelligence, her grace, and her courage, and he took every opportunity to support her, to listen, and to be present in ways that mattered most to her. The weeks passed. The princess felt her initial fear completely dissolve. She had come to trust him implicitly, knowing that he would respect her choices and her world. Their interactions had become natural and effortless, filled with humor, curiosity, and genuine warmth. She saw in him a companion who could stand with her through challenges, who could appreciate her strengths without overshadowing them, and who could bring comfort and joy into her life. It was a transformation she had never imagined possible when the engagement was first announced. Yet it had happened gradually, with patience, understanding, and the courage to be vulnerable with one another. The day of their official union arrived, and the palace was adorned with the colors and lights of celebration. The princess walked confidently through the halls, her heart calm and her spirit light. She glanced at the human standing beside her, and saw in his steady gaze the same sincerity, respect and kindness that had first captured her trust. In that moment, she understood that their connection was genuine, that it had grown beyond duty, and that they were ready to face the future together. When they stood before their people, hand in hand, the princess felt a profound sense of peace. She no longer feared the human beside her. She saw a partner, a companion, and a friend. Their story, once filled with uncertainty and anxiety, had blossomed into a union of trust, understanding, and hope. They had bridged the gap between worlds, finding in each other a source of strength and joy. And as they exchanged vows and began their life together, the princess realized that the human groom she had once feared had become someone she could rely on, admire, and cherish. From that day forward, their bond continued to grow, a living example of the power of patience, empathy, and honesty. Together, they navigated the challenges of interspecies life, celebrated the wonders of their combined worlds, and supported each other in ways that neither could have imagined at the beginning. Their story became one of inspiration, showing that even the most unlikely connections could flourish into genuine companionship, and that fear, when met with understanding and respect, could transform into trust, admiration, and love.